Nowadays, professional soldiers receive their money directly into their bank accounts on a regular basis. You may be surprised to learn that the Romans may have done something similar. The Romans were about for many hundreds of years, and the way that the soldiers of Rome were paid changed with time. This video will focus on the High Roman Empire, from the first emperor Augustus until the middle of the 3rd century AD. This would have been how soldiers in the film Gladiator were paid. During this period, Rome had a very large standing army, perhaps of up to 500,000 men, with every soldier expecting to be rewarded for their service. The first place we need to look to learn about Roman army pay is the ancient literary sources. These are texts written at the time that have been preserved for us until present day. Using these texts comes with many problems. Ancient texts are preserved somewhat randomly, so our collection is very sporadic. Another point is that these texts were written by an elite group of wealthy men. Many of these would have hated the common soldier and seen them as brutish. So we have to be careful when we see what they say. First, let's look at a writer called Josephus. He records the siege of Jerusalem in AD 70. Josephus wrote that, "Accordingly, as the usual appointed time, when the commander must distribute the subsistence money to the soldiers, he gave orders that the centurion should put the army into battle array in the face of the enemy, and then give every one of the soldiers their pay. So the soldiers, according to custom, opened the cases wherein their arms before lay covered, and marched with their breastplates on, as did the horsemen lead their horses in their fine trappings." It appears from this source that the soldiers received their pay from their commanders in the form of a parade. As this was done in full view of the enemy, it is likely that the Romans carried out this payday in order to intimidate the enemy with their organisation and carefree attitude. What is interesting is that Josephus mentions the usual appointed time. When we add this observation to other sources, we find that there were 3 of these paydays. This was known as a stipendium. Luckily for historians, the dry heat of Egypt has preserved many administrative documents, like this one on papyrus that refers to one payday on the Calend Januari, the 1st of January. How much money were the soldiers given? Our sources tell us that during the time of Augustus, soldiers received 900 sesterces per year. Later emperors increased army pay to buy their loyalty. Domitian increased pay to 1,200 sesterces by adding a 4th payday. Septimius Severus increased it to 2,400, Caracalla increased it to 3,600, and Maximinus Thrax increased it to a whopping 7,200 sesterces. To put this into perspective, 1 sestertius would get you around 4 pints of beer. So a soldier was paid equivalent of 3,600 pints of beer under Augustus, or 28,800 under Maximinus Thrax. A sestertius, worth 4 pints of beer, was a large copper coin, but this does not mean that the soldiers actually received this coin. The Romans used the sestertius as a unit of accounting. For example, if a modern day soldier is paid $30,000, we do not expect the soldier to receive 30,000 $1 bills. There are different denominations, and the Romans were no different. They had tiny coins, like this quadrans, only useful for entry into a bathhouse. They also had valuable gold coins, like this aureus, which could be used as a living expense for 4 months. 1 aureus was worth 25 denarii, 1 denarius was worth 4 sesterces, 1 sestertius was worth 4 asses, and 1 ass was worth 4 quadrans. There were also other coins in use, like the depondius, which was worth 2 asses. If you had 1 aureus, you could theoretically exchange this for 1,600 quadrans, weighing a few kilograms. Unfortunately, the sources do not directly say what denomination the Roman soldiers were paid in. The ancient writer Tacitus wrote a speech where a soldier was complaining that he was putting his body on the line for merely 10 asses a day. Tacitus was likely using a low denomination of coin to highlight how little the soldiers were paid, hence why he also mentioned the daily pay, when we know that soldiers were paid 3 or 4 times a year. If soldiers were paid in asses, they would have to carry around 400 every payday. That is very unrealistic. This is when we have to turn to the archaeology, the evidence buried in the ground. In Roman Britain, where 10% of the Roman army was based, we find that areas under military control tend to have more denarii, silver coins, than areas under civilian control. This would suggest that the army were using the denarius and probably being paid in these silver coins. In AD 9, 3 legions were slaughtered whilst campaigning in Germany. This disaster is known as the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest and has been identified as taking place near the village of Kalkreis. Spread out over many hundreds of meters, approximately 1,600 coins have been found, probably dropped by slaughtered Roman soldiers. Of these, about 800 were silver denarii, 800 were asses, and 21 were the gold aurei. By value, 58% of the coins are silver, 38 are gold, and only 4% are copper. It is likely then that the Roman soldiers were paid in gold and silver. So each payday, Roman soldiers could expect 75 silver coins, denarii, or 3 gold coins, aurei. Or could they? This document is a papyrus, written by an auxiliary soldier fighting in Judea called Gaius Messius. As an auxiliary soldier, he wasn't a full Roman citizen, so was only paid 600 sesterces a year, only 2/3 what a legionary soldier would make. In this papyrus, Gaius Messius complains that, "I have received my stipendium of 50 denarii, out of which I have paid barley money, 16 denarii, food expenses, 20 denarii, boots, 5 denarii, leather strappings, 2 denarii, linen tunics, 7 denarii. Poor Gaius Messius had no money after the deductions for food and equipment. He was penniless. So despite his annual salary being 600 sesterces, he actually received nothing. This is an extreme example, but shows that most money in a soldier's salary was actually taken away, including their pensions. In reality then, soldiers would only receive a portion of their actual pay, with the rest being kept on the books to give out when soldiers retired. Occasionally, soldiers would be given special gifts from the emperor, known as donatives. These were probably in gold and silver, and were sort of like bonuses. In all likelihood, the emperor gave out these donatives to ensure the loyalty of the soldiers. So, how was the Roman army paid? Soldiers were paid in 3 or 4 installments per year in silver and gold coins, like these ones. However, some of their pay was taken away from them to pay for their living expenses and pension. As a bonus, soldiers were occasionally given donatives by the emperor in silver or gold coins to ensure that they remained loyal.